So, some of you may remember that I was a pretty big fan of Watcher Entertainment, a company with a channel here on YouTube that got caught up in a pretty major scandal. They were the talk of the town for quite some time, and by quite some time I mean like 3 days, and it all started with their now privated video, Goodbye YouTube. It's been about a year since that video dropped, so I wanted to take a look back at the drama itself and the ripple effect it had on Watcher, the creators behind it, and their audience. I would also like to think that I can provide some unique insight as a former fan of Watcher. Obviously, I don't speak for everyone, but I supported these guys for years, I was there when everything happened, and the whole situation is just really interesting to me. And for your convenience, I have organized my points into a vaguely chronological, internet-friendly, numbered list. I am the first person to do that. Part 1. Wheeze. You can't really talk about Watcher without first talking about BuzzFeed Unsolved. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Unsolved. It was extremely popular. The show featured co-hosts Ryan Bergara, who created the series, and Shane Madej. It was split into 2 subcategories, Supernatural and True Crime. Supernatural often saw the duo visiting various haunted locations.
Tell us your name. Apple Tater?
And True Crime mostly consisted of Ryan and Shane sitting at a desk discussing various unsolved crimes. Unsolved's greatest strength was always its humor and the dynamic between Shane and Ryan, or the Ghoul Boys. There are so many mainstream jokes and memes that came from this show.
Hey there, demons. It's me, your boy. I've connected the 2 dots.
You didn't connect shit, but
I've connected them.
Because these guys had chemistry. Ryan was always the believer, and Shane was always the skeptic, and wherever they went, they were always goofing off and riffing on each other.
No, don't loop me into your shit. Yep. Stop looping me. I'd hate when you do this in the demon places.
Well, then tell him you're not part of this.
I'm not part of his little charade.
You're talking to Goatman now.
I see what you've done.
I really think that's why True Crime was my favorite, even as someone who isn't usually drawn to the genre of true crime. I mean, I watched that show Blackbird back in 2022, but that was more for personal reasons. I liked seeing Shane and Ryan explore haunted hospitals and houses, but all I really wanted was to see the 2 of them sitting at a desk cracking jokes. Unsolved was formatted in a way that sometimes the episode would cut to a black screen and the dialogue would be typed out, yellow text for Shane and blue text for Ryan, and every so often, you'd get a wheeze.
Well, I think I know the end of this story.
I can't explain why we all loved it so much, but people went nuts for the wheeze. They made merch of it and everything. And I should mention that after each episode, they would upload an accompanying post-mortem, where they would go over the episode and answer questions and comments from fans. Post-mortem is where we got the hot dogga, which started as kind of a joke from Shane and then turned into a full-blown series within a series with a ton of characters and bonkers lore. There were musical numbers and everything. BuzzFeed Unsolved ran from 2016 to 2021, and in those 5 years, the show accumulated a massive fan base. More specifically, Shane and Ryan accumulated a massive fan base, because in the end, the viewers were watching because of them and their friendship. The fan base skewed pretty young, too. A lot of fans started watching Unsolved as children. I think I was like 12 or 13, so by the time the show ended, a lot of fans felt very emotionally attached to Unsolved and to Shane and Ryan, because they had grown up watching the show. The BuzzFeed Unsolved channel still exists and continues posting content, mostly just compilations from the show, but for most, the main draw of the channel left when the Ghoul Boys left BuzzFeed. Part 2. Goodbye BuzzFeed. It's kind of hard to imagine now, but BuzzFeed used to absolutely dominate YouTube. There are so many people who started their career working for or with BuzzFeed and then became stars in their own right, and every single one of them eventually left BuzzFeed for various reasons. In most cases, it was because working for a company like BuzzFeed didn't provide a lot of opportunities for independence or creative control, and a lot of their creative talent felt burned out and like they would be better off with their own YouTube channel. And they were basically always right. Shane and Ryan made the decision to leave BuzzFeed in 2019, but stayed on to complete the final seasons of Unsolved. A lot of their peers at BuzzFeed left around the same time frame, like Sophia Nygaard and the Try Guys. They made sure that both True Crime and Supernatural had a proper send-off, which I found to be quite touching. Nobody wanted to see Unsolved come to an end, but fans knew that just like everyone before them, the Ghoul Boys were on to bigger and better things. Part 3. All Hail the Watcher. When Ryan and Shane left BuzzFeed in 2019, they announced that they would also be launching their own digital entertainment company, Watcher Entertainment. The name Watcher actually came from the true crime case of the Watcher of Westfield, who harassed and stalked a family by mailing letters to their home. Kind of a strange thing to name your company after, but it makes sense in context, as the Ghoul Boys had covered the case on an episode of Unsolved.
All hail the Watcher, end quote.
All hail the Watcher! Yeah, one thing I've always said, I've always gone on record saying, all hail the Watcher.
That's true, he has said that. He says it every day when he walks into the
day
office.
One, all hail the Watcher. I walk into BuzzFeed, morning, all hail the Watcher!
I would now like to introduce our third key player, Stephen Lim. Stephen had also worked at BuzzFeed, where he co-created the series Worth It. In this series, Stephen, his co-host Andrew Ilnicki, and their cameraman Adam Bianchi would compare low and high-priced versions of the same foods. So his style of content was very different from Ryan and Shane's. It was more focused on food, and Worth It was upfront about the fact that money was being spent on this show, because the dishes were expensive. Obviously, Unsolved had a big budget too, but it wasn't baked into the formula of the show. Stephen also had a very different audience from Ryan and Shane, and a lot of Unsolved fans weren't all that familiar with Stephen or his content. But nevertheless, Stephen left BuzzFeed with Ryan and Shane and co-created Watcher. All three served as CEO of the company. Ryan, Shane, and Stephen were the faces of Watcher, but there was a whole team of employees behind the scenes. For example, Katie LeBlanc, who worked on Unsolved and had been working with Ryan and Shane from the beginning, was hired as head of development.
She's undoubtedly the person for the role, and you don't often get your dream casting, and she's it, so she's someone to build with.
Watcher Entertainment launched in 2020 with 7 different series, and that number would only grow. Because there are so many shows under the Watcher umbrella, I'm just going to give you a brief flyover of the ones that will be relevant to this video, which is most of them. Ghost Files, a spiritual successor to BuzzFeed Unsolved Supernatural, where Ryan and Shane visit haunted locations. Instead of postmortems, they have debriefs. This is their most popular series. Mystery Files, a spiritual successor to BuzzFeed Unsolved True Crime, where Ryan and Shane discuss any mystery they find interesting, not just crimes. Puppet History. This one is Shane's brainchild and is also very popular. A jolly little puppet, known simply as the Professor, presents his guests with a history lesson via puppet show as they compete for a cup full of magic jelly beans. There's a musical number at the end of each episode. Guests include familiar faces like illustrator and Shane's wife, Sarah Rubin, Zach Kornfeld from the Try Guys, and Kate Peterman, who was the best guest they ever had. Garrett Watts is a recurring guest on the show, and all the comments on his first video were joking about how he's finally hanging out with the right Ryan and Shane. I just thought that was funny. In case you couldn't tell from that long-winded synopsis, this one is my favorite. Are You Scared? This is another one of my favorites, where Ryan and Shane read spooky stories submitted by fans. There was originally a factor where they had to guess whether or not the story was true or imagined, but they dropped that pretty early on. Too Many Spirits. Ryan and Shane read spooky stories submitted by fans, but this time they're drunk. Stephen appears in this series, making themed cocktails despite his lack of bartending experience or skill. And fun fact, this series was actually created by Katie LeBlanc. Top 5 Beatdown. Ryan and Shane compare their top 5 lists in a random category with an expert in the field. The category itself can be anything from chips to cereals to hot Disney dads, and the lineup of experts has included Drew Gooden, Jarvis Johnson, and Rhett and Link. I really love this series too. The cereal episode was incredible.
Oatmeal. What?
Weird Wonderful World. Ryan and Shane explore weird and whimsical, lesser-known destinations in Los Angeles. Dish Granted. This was a fairly short-lived series from Stephen where he used the finest of ingredients to make dishes for his friends, including Simu Liu. Hidden Narratives. I just wanted to throw in another one of Stephen's in the interest of fairness. Rather than a series on YouTube, this was a podcast centered around the rise in anti-Asian racism during the COVID-19 pandemic. Stephen would interview fellow Asian Americans from a variety of professions to hear their perspective and their stories. I'm not just trying to throw Stephen a bone here, I think this was a brilliant idea and a great listen. I really respect the way Stephen honors his heritage and his content and used his platform to elevate other Asian American voices. For Your Amusement, another podcast, this time led by Ryan, all about theme parks. It's clearly a passion project for him, which makes me feel bad because it's not that popular. They did manage to get Jenny Nicholson as a guest, who is probably the best person you could ever have on your podcast about theme parks. Podwatcher. Yet another podcast where Shane, Ryan, and Steven talk about whatever they want. Here's What You Do. One last podcast. This one was sort of an advice column where fans would reach out for guidance on a certain issue, and Shane, Ryan, and Steven would tell them what to do. And finally, Making Watcher, a look behind the scenes at Watcher Entertainment. Their early episodes were a really interesting look into how exactly the company got off the ground in the first place. Shane, Ryan, and Steven emphasized their lack of business experience and how risky the entire operation was. They came across as guys who had a lot of creative ideas and were willing to risk everything for this dream they all shared. It made you as the viewer really sympathize with them and root for the company's success, especially if you were a longtime fan. In 2023, Ryan and Shane stepped down as CEO to focus on content creation, leaving Steven as the sole CEO. For the first 4 years of Watcher's life, they were pretty successful. Steven, and especially Ryan and Shane, were very lucky in the sense that they had an insane amount of goodwill from their fan base that had accumulated over the past 8 years. Their fans really wanted them to succeed, they loved the content Watcher was putting out, and Ryan, Shane, and Steven's reputations were very, very good. Until Goodbye YouTube. Part 4. Goodbye YouTube. On April 12th, 2025, Watcher announced via Twitter that something big was coming, along with a clip from Mystery Files. On April 17th, they posted a countdown on their Instagram. They were really hyping this up and framing this mystery event as something to be very excited about. I remember assuming it would be a new series or even another channel. A day later, Steven posted on his Tumblr about the upcoming announcement. He described being at a crossroads, feeling nervous about the risk Watcher was about to take, and closed out with, "See you on the other side." And then, on April 19th, Goodbye YouTube. In this video, uploaded to their YouTube channel, Shane, Ryan, and Steven announced that they would be leaving YouTube in favor of their own exclusive streaming service, Watcher TV, which costs $5.99 a month. The video was 14 minutes long, and the trio spent most of the runtime reflecting on what brought them here and the development of Watcher. They mentioned that the content they're currently making is very costly to produce. Ryan mentions that a season of Ghost Files costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to make.
First, we have to travel to the location itself. We have to pay the location fee. We have to pay freelance staff that comes to help us shoot that when we're shooting in the studio. We have to pay for the studio to shoot the actual episode in. Then we have to pay for post. Before that, we also have to do the pre-production of the episode. And when you add that all up, we're talking about an end of a season that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Steven says they feel as though YouTube is no longer the best place to continue making content. They thank their fans for the support and ask that they follow them one last time to their streaming service. They claim that Watcher TV will allow them to improve their production quality and introduce new talent, including Andrew and Adam from Worth It, who would be joining Steven's new series Travel Season that was basically a successor to Worth It. They would no longer be uploading to YouTube unless it was to promote Watcher TV, and apparently they chose the price of $5.99 a month because it was affordable for everyone.
We want to keep the price low enough where anybody and everybody is able to afford it.
The video ends with Ryan reiterating that this is their goodbye to YouTube, and to anyone who will not be joining the streamer, he thanks you for your past support. So that was Goodbye YouTube. The video itself has a very corporate feel. It's filmed like a little documentary with like sentimental piano music. They were like, let's wear muted colors to show that we're serious about this. And Shane was like, I will not be doing that. They seemed excited about this new chapter in their careers. It was clear from their attitudes in the video itself and the way the Watcher guys went about promoting this announcement that they were expecting this to go over fairly well. It went over very badly. Like, I cannot stress enough how badly this went over. It could not have been worse. In the following days, the video received over 200,000 dislikes and the channel lost over 100,000 subscribers. It was insane. I have never seen a fan base so quickly and unanimously reject an idea, and I have never seen a channel with such a great track record take such a complete nosedive. This was probably how James Charles fans felt after Tati posted Bye Sister. People were pissed. They were unwilling or unable to pay for this streaming service. They thought the price was too high, and they were angry that Watcher was completely abandoning YouTube. And to make matters worse, after uploading this video, all of their existing content was wiped from YouTube. They got a ton of backlash pretty much immediately, and everything was quickly reinstated, with Watcher confirming their content was not being removed from YouTube. They kind of tried to make it sound like that was never their intention, but that was just a straight up lie. According to a Variety article published the same day as Goodbye YouTube, the company had told Variety that they would be removing their content, with Ryan later claiming that that was not the case. And amid all this backlash, out of nowhere, Sarah joins the fight. On her Tumblr, she made a post in support of the move to Watcher TV, saying it was worth the price and it was a necessary decision because not all YouTubers have Mr. Beast money. I think she thought she was helping. She was not. Steven also made an Instagram post about the move, which has since been deleted, and that wasn't received super well either. The next day, Variety published another article from the same author about the public response to Watcher TV. And the day after that, Simu Liu posted and then deleted an Instagram story that many assumed was about the Watcher drama. Shane's brother posted this on his Instagram, referring to a quote from Goodbye YouTube where Steven said he learned how to be a human on YouTube, which a lot of people found kind of strange.
I grew up on YouTube. All of my heroes were on YouTube. I learned how to be a human on YouTube.
And as all of this was going down, there was the defrosting. This was such a weird and kind of unrelated part of it, but there was this whole thing on Tumblr where this meme from the official Watcher account kept showing up in users' feeds and was being promoted like an ad. A lot of users assumed that Watcher was paying to promote this stupid post until Tumblr themselves made it clear that they were behind the whole thing and Watcher's meme had been chosen and promoted at random. I know that seems like kind of a weird thing to bring up now, but it happened very shortly after Goodbye YouTube, and I'm going to be mentioning it again later, so keep that in your back pocket. Don't let it melt. So hopefully my synopsis has effectively conveyed to you what utter chaos this was. Everyone was talking about this. It was huge news in the YouTube community in general, not just fans of Watcher, and was obviously being reported on by mainstream news outlets. I remember it like it was yesterday, like I remember where I was. I really thought it was a late April Fool's joke at first, and I was so flabbergasted when I read through the comments and realized no, they're dead serious and people are mad. I was mad, to be completely honest, like I made a video about the situation the day it happened. It's hard to describe just how short-sighted and half-baked this decision was. For no particular reason, let's use a bridge as our metaphor. It was like these guys had spent 8 years building a bridge, crossed it, blew it up with dynamite, and then were confused when nobody wanted to join them on the other side. This was such a bad video and decision that it accounts for the next 3 chapters of this video. Part 5, Snitch on the Rich. Okay, so obviously a lot of fans were upset by Watcher's decision, but why? Well, there are a lot of factors at play here, and a lot of different reasons fans were angry. First of all, this decision and the way the company went about it made them look out of touch and like they didn't care about their fans. They treated this announcement like it was something their fans should be excited about, like they should be grateful. One of the biggest criticisms Watcher faced was that no, $6 a month actually isn't affordable for everyone, and to be frank, assuming that it is kind of insane to me. The minimum wage in this country is $7.25. If people are struggling to afford groceries, they're not going to want to subscribe to yet another streaming service that has exactly one YouTube channel on it. Remember, the majority of their fan base had been watching since the Unsolved days when they were really young. Their fans now are teenagers, or maybe college students, who don't have a lot of disposable income. They're Gen Z, left-leaning, and have a lot of anti-capitalist sentiments. Watcher's big on Tumblr. That should tell you everything. And throughout their career, Watcher themselves had expressed those same sentiments, especially Shane. He was always making jokes about eating the rich. There was a whole Puppet History song about it. He even encouraged fans to share passwords for Watcher TV, his own streaming service.
And look, you can share it, with your friends.
That's true.
What are we gonna do?
So the move to Watcher TV seemed to run counter to a lot of what they'd been saying. It made them look like hypocrites and cost them their relatability. After Sarah made her Tumblr post, a lot of people pointed out that, yeah, maybe you don't have Mr. Beast money, but you do have money. Sarah had also posted about buying a $100 tote bag right before she said that Watcher TV was necessary to make a survivable living. So that rubbed a lot of folks the wrong way. The comments on this post are nuts. I can't believe she left this up. Listen, I like Sarah. I like her art, but this post was pretty tactless and ended up making things worse. So now not only are Watcher out of touch, not only are they hypocrites, but they're greedy. And let's not forget, they were going to totally quit YouTube and get rid of all their existing content. No matter what it is you're selling, people don't like being made to pay for things that were once free. It felt like a slap in the face for the fans who couldn't afford to pay for Watcher TV or simply didn't want to. It felt as though Watcher's fans were disposable to them. This perceived disregard for their fanbase took a lot of viewers by surprise because the Watcher guys had previously been very engaged with their fanbase. They'd been communicating with fans through post-mortem and later debrief. A huge chunk of their shows rely on fan submissions. Are You Scared even had a fan art contest, which I entered and lost. I just think they should have had a better sense of who their fans were and how they would feel about making this kind of move. Another point of contention was that from the viewer's perspective, a lot of Watcher's problems were self-inflicted. They were very clear in Goodbye YouTube that they needed to move to Watcher TV in order to produce the same amount and quality of content. The implication was that the company had been struggling financially and were trying to stay afloat. But as their channel took off, the company had clearly been spending more and more money where they didn't really need to be. That's why the defrosting thing was such an issue, because it looked like the company was spending money to promote a post to a user base that notoriously hates ads. Watcher hired a staff of 25 employees, which was just completely unnecessary for the work they're doing. They have an office in LA that's presumably very expensive. They bought a ton of insane equipment for Ghost Files and built a full set, and I can imagine that amount of travel isn't cheap either. Clearly these guys wanted to do the best possible job they could, and I'm not going to fault them for that, but it's clear that they just weren't using their money wisely. Every series of theirs was overproduced. Shows like Are You Scared, Too Many Spirits, Top 5 Beatdown, and even Mystery Files should cost very little to make. They don't have to be anything more than Ryan and Shane sitting in an office or a backyard. Even Ghost Files doesn't need to be as bloated as it is. Folks aren't watching for your fancy ghost hunting gadgets, they're watching for you and your personality, and that's free. Don't get me wrong, the production value across the board is very nice, but it's not necessary, especially if you're struggling financially. I really just think they went too big too quickly, and rather than downsizing their operations or stripping back all those bells and whistles, they asked their fan base to cover the extra costs. Travel season was being used as a way to draw people to the streamer, when in reality it did the opposite. Just like Worth It and Dish Granted, travel season was costly to produce. And remember, Steven didn't really have the same dedicated fan base as Ryan and Shane, so fans weren't super psyched about paying to watch Steven eat expensive food. It was fun to watch when it was all on BuzzFeed's dime, and later Watcher's dime, but now it was on the fans' dime. When the Goodbye YouTube drama was at its peak, Moist Critical made a video on the situation that I'm sure many of you have seen. It got more views than Goodbye YouTube, and for many viewers, it was the final nail in Watcher's coffin.
They went for a kickflip and ended up breaking both their ankles on this bad boy here.
I'm not going to just parrot all of his points, but he basically broke down how much the company was actually making and drew the conclusion that their choice to move to Watcher TV was largely out of greed.
You're not really in a financially struggling situation with this channel. I'm just going to lay down the brass tacks here.
This video was another huge blow to Watcher's reputation because it was coming from someone in the industry who was very familiar with how this kind of business works.
I have more than 25 employees, and I'm able to finance all of that completely fine through streaming. And I was still able to do all of that through a fraction of their numbers here.
In a way, having such a dedicated audience was both a blessing and a curse for the company. They had gotten pretty far and received almost limitless support for nearly a decade, and they squandered it in less than 15 minutes. It's like watching your friend blow all their money on decorative soaps and then turn around and be like, I'm actually never speaking to you again unless you pay me every time we hang out. Part 6. TV caliber content. Something that was repeatedly emphasized in Goodbye YouTube was watchers' desire to create TV caliber content.
Television caliber content, television caliber quality content.
The television caliber content that you know and love.
It was a driving factor in their choice to create this streaming service, but what is it? The best example of an ex-BuzzFeed employee who makes TV caliber content is Quinta Brunson, who literally created a television show that airs on television, and it worked out incredibly well for her. If you're not already watching Abbott Elementary, you should be. I truly believe it's the best comedy on cable right now.
Since I've been here, Ava's biggest improvements to the school include renaming the Wi-Fi network Bad Bitches Only and using field trip money to put 26-inch rims on one of the buses.
I think in their minds, television is more legitimate than YouTube, but that's not necessarily true. It's totally possible to create high-quality videos on YouTube and for a YouTube series to be taken seriously by a wider audience. And besides, BuzzFeed Unsolved is streaming on Hulu and Amazon. Is that not TV caliber? Truth be told, I just don't think they like being thought of as YouTubers. Ryan's been trying to book mainstream acting gigs for years now. They started out emphasizing their lack of business experience, but over time they started thinking of themselves as a real company, which they were, but I think it kind of got to their heads. That's why they kept striving for higher and higher production value. It wasn't for their fans because that was never what their fans wanted. They would have been happy with plain text on a black background. All they wanted was for Ryan and Shane to sit in a room together and wheeze. Really, the best example of a YouTube channel who launched a successful streaming service would be the Try Guys. They launched their streamer about a month after Watcher, but had been planning it for much longer. They first teased it like 6 months before it launched. There was a fair bit of speculation that Watcher found out about their plan and decided to beat them to the punch, which was why their rollout was so rushed. I don't want to say definitively if that's true or not because there's no way to know, but Watcher and the Try Guys had been collaborating for years. After the Goodbye YouTube fallout, Keith unfollowed everything Watcher related on Instagram, and Zach unfollowed everyone besides the official Watcher account, which many assumed was because of some kind of streamer-related beef. By the way, Eugene was not involved in this at all. When Try Guys made their announcement, the difference in reception was like night and day, and I honestly wonder if they used Watcher's rollout as a guide of what not to do. Try Guys presented their streamer as just another way to support them, the same as buying merch. They emphasized that it was totally okay if fans couldn't or didn't want to subscribe, when Watcher had made it pretty clear that it was the end of the road for non-paying fans. And most importantly, the Try Guys never planned to leave YouTube. And it's not as simple as Try Guys good, Watcher bad. But with situations like this, it's all about how people feel and how they perceive you. Try Guys had been operating as a business longer than Watcher and had recently navigated their own major scandal. They too took a turn on the apology couch. My guess is that they were simply better equipped to execute a shift like this and handle any potential issues. However, I worry that this growing trend of YouTubers launching streaming services is setting kind of a bad precedent. I'm not saying nobody should do it, I completely understand why you would. Creators are moving away from YouTube for the same reasons they moved away from BuzzFeed. It can be very restrictive and even stifling for a company that's trying to grow and diversify. But the last thing we need is for each individual YouTube channel to start their own exclusive streaming service. I feel like more channels should be forming a Nebula type thing. Honestly, Watcher and Try Guys could have done it. But to Watcher, the streamer wasn't just another way to grow their business, it was the next and presumably final step in their career. Shane, Ryan, and Steven seemed desperate to be seen as legitimate, as more than just a YouTube channel. They wanted so badly to be taken seriously that they lost what made them charming. Part 7. Worth it? Watcher TV went live on April 19th, the same day as Goodbye YouTube, but it was still in a beta period. It didn't properly launch until May 31st, and to be honest, that never made much sense to me. This entire premise was already kind of a hard sell, so I feel like it would have been better to have the streamer up and running, ready to go, with an extensive backlog of content for new subscribers to watch. The million-dollar question, or the $5.99 a month question, is, was Watcher TV worth the price? It depends on who you ask. Subscribers got exclusive series, including travel season, early access to new videos, and access to Watcher's entire catalog, which was originally supposed to be the only place you could find it. There just wasn't a lot of new stuff when the streamer launched, and they were only posting once or twice a week. As a result, many felt it just wasn't worth the price. I just feel like Watcher TV should have been a little more ready if it was going to be Watcher's primary or even their only platform. If you're not making enough money, which was their claim, then the natural solution would be to add revenue streams, not subtract them. You may be wondering why Watcher didn't just have a Patreon instead of a streaming service. Well, they did. They restructured it a bit after the streamer launched, only to take it down a few months later. This makes no sense to me. It seemed to be making a decent amount of money, and I don't think having a Patreon would necessarily prevent fans from subscribing to Watcher TV. The streaming service has one fixed price. On Patreon, fans can choose whichever level they feel most comfortable with. There were plenty of patrons donating $5 a month. There were plenty of patrons donating more than that. They were happy to give the Watcher guys money, but then that became the expectation. Watcher wanted all their fans to give them money or lose them forever. It's the lack of options that creates an issue. Watcher's patrons weren't even notified that the Patreon would be shutting down until it happened, and after the streamer launched, none of them were given a subscription as part of their benefits, which I think they should have. If they're already giving you up to $100 a month, why not throw in a Watcher TV subscription? That would have been such an easy way to draw in more patrons, which draws in more profit. The analytics for Watcher TV aren't publicly available, so I have no idea how well it's doing, but I can't imagine it's bringing in the kind of revenue they thought it would. The Watcher guys seem to assume that a majority of their audience would subscribe to the streaming service, which realistically was never going to happen even under the best of circumstances. And of course, there were a good number of fans who thought Watcher TV was worth the price, subscribed, and really enjoyed it. But to the internet at large, this controversy had done a lot of damage to Watcher's reputation. Actually, it was their reputation. This was how a lot of outsiders found out about Watcher, which is pretty unfortunate. They became YouTube's #1 laughingstock after their goodbye video, which is why, just a few days later, they apologized. Part 8, an update. On April 22nd, just 3 days after Goodbye YouTube, Watcher returned to YouTube to post an update, which was essentially an apology video. It was an update, but it was an apology video.
They've announced that they've made a mistake.
We messed up.
They basically walked back a lot of what they had said in Goodbye YouTube. Watcher would no longer be leaving the platform and would instead post new videos a month after they debuted on the streaming service. Their patrons would be getting a free subscription to Watcher TV, and those who had already bought one would be getting a refund. Steven, Shane, and Ryan apologized for the way they had handled the situation and emphasized how important their fans were to them and always had been.
You are the reason why we've been able to do anything at this company.
And we are incredibly grateful for your support.
They admitted they had been ignorant about the affordability of Watcher TV and promised to continue improving and delivering their fans the best possible content.
We regret stating and implying that it's a price that anybody can afford, and we fully acknowledge that it is not.
This apology was received fairly well. A lot of fans did forgive them, and I can imagine they probably also subscribed to the streaming service. They'd made a bad business decision, and they were fixing it the best way they knew how. And to their credit, they seemed really sorry.
We messed up.
I feel like it's easy to get so jaded with these YouTube apologies, but it looked like the drama had really taken its toll on them. It seemed like they had no idea this would be received so poorly, which is just beyond me. Others were a bit more cynical, and I don't really blame them. My personal take on this apology is that Watcher did realize on some level that they made a mistake, but they weren't really seeing the big picture. They didn't address the Variety article and the fact that they had lied about removing their content from YouTube. They didn't address anything Moist Critical had said in his video, which indicated that the company was much more financially successful than they had claimed. It just didn't seem like anyone was willing to address the root issue. They were bad at business, and the obvious next step was to scale back their production, which they were still unwilling to do. For a pretty big chunk of their audience, the damage had been done. Watcher had simply lost their trust.
What about us? What about everything we've been through? What about us?
But given the turnaround between Goodbye YouTube and an update, I do think this apology was pretty good. I can see why it worked for some and why it didn't work for others. Like I said, the apology was good, but that was in huge part due to a lot of sneaky little PR tricks. For example, Shane had been moved to the middle of the couch, and Shane and Ryan did most of the talking. Shane specifically stated that all three of them had a role in this decision.
This is a decision that we all believe is the best for Watcher.
These may seem like random choices, but they're really not, and they were largely based on the nature of the backlash. Let me explain. Some of what I'm about to say may seem kind of mean, but I have to say it because it's true and it's important. During the initial fallout, a lot of fans singled out Steven because they did not like him. As you may recall, he never really had the same dedicated fan base that Shane and Ryan had, so Steven was kind of a third wheel. His shows didn't perform as well, they usually were themed around spending large amounts of money, and Steven was the sole CEO at the time, so the optics weren't good. The Instagram post he made shortly after Goodbye YouTube didn't help matters, and fans kept dunking on him for owning a Tesla, and when the drama was at its peak, fans started doing some digging. They found a book from a homophobic pastor in the background of his living room. He was found to be aligned with a homophobic church, and he had once said on an episode of Here's What You Do that he had friends who were homophobic and racist.
It's hard to really read into this because I have a lot of friends who are a little bit racist and a little bit homophobic, and I'm still friends with them. And I'm not saying that I'm friends with them because of their values. I just value them as people themselves, and I try to keep them around and try to, educate them with what I can, but it's not something that I don't want to cut ties with everybody because of their belief system, because frankly, I have a different value system than Katie and Shane and Ryan.
Part of Watcher's fan base is queer, a large enough part that they sold Pride merch, so this was just another reason for fans to turn against Steven and against Watcher. He did apologize on Discord and stated that he did not agree with any prejudiced beliefs that the people around him expressed, and his continued contact with them was out of a desire to understand and potentially educate them. After that episode, Here's What You Do actually released a follow-up episode correcting what had been said, and the podcast ended shortly after because, according to Ryan, none of them were very good at giving advice.
We did an advice podcast before
I
this.
think we mentioned it earlier.
Well, it was mentioned.
Long story short, we
I've
weren't
cut every
reference
of it out.
we weren't good at it.
The odds were stacked against Steven from the beginning, and it was very easy for fans to use him as a scapegoat. Not only could they pin the blame on the member of Watcher they liked the least, but they could also mentally absolve the other two of guilt. The amount of comments I saw about how Ryan and especially Shane were innocent and had been forced into this decision by Steven was just ludicrous. Yes, Steven is the CEO, but all three are the face of the company. All three of them were sitting on that couch. Shane and Ryan were just as responsible as Steven. I really hate to say it, but even though Ryan and Shane had always been a dynamic duo, Shane was the favorite. People still really liked Ryan, and I'm sure he was a lot of people's favorite, but Shane was the favorite. Fans were convinced that he in particular had nothing to do with the streamer. This was partially because he was the most well-liked by the fandom, and because he more than anyone had a track record of making eat the rich type statements. But in my opinion, Shane came out of this looking like the biggest hypocrite. All three of them looked like hypocrites, but Shane was a hypocrite with cheese and extra pickles. Obviously, he's not a billionaire, he's not included in Eat the Rich, but the way they went about this move seemed to contradict the beliefs he had expressed to the public, and Sarah's comments just compounded that. She's his wife. After the apology, the fandom turned against itself, especially on Reddit. It became split between the ones who forgave Watcher and those who didn't. The former fans would criticize basically every move the company made, and the current fans would criticize the former fans for complaining. And I have to say that not all of the backlash was entirely fair, and some people were taking it way too far. In my opinion, rich YouTubers spending money on cars and tote bags is not the problem. The problem is when those rich people mismanage their business and then ask their fans for money. I hate to use the word parasocial, but that's exactly what it was. These fans had been following Ryan and Shane since the BuzzFeed days. They felt like they knew them, and now they were realizing that Ryan and Shane didn't seem to know who their fan base was, or what they would want, and were also kind of ignorant of their financial status.
The problem is you have never understood me and what I have to go through.
They'd been so invested in these people for so long, and they now felt like these guys didn't care about their fans. It felt kind of personal. And you might be thinking, wow, that sounds insane. And yeah, it does, but that's kind of how this works. Fans will get attached to a creator, and whether they realize it or not, they form a bond with them. They build this idea of that creator in their head, and they feel betrayed and disappointed when they find out that's not who they really are. It happens all the time. And Watcher had been feeding into that parasocial relationship from day one. I don't think anyone had malicious or manipulative intentions, but most of their content included fan interaction in some way. Watcher was built on the support of unsolved fans. If they hadn't already accrued such a supportive audience, I don't think Watcher Entertainment would even exist. This whole ordeal was a really interesting look into parasocial relationships, in the way viewers reacted, and in the way Watcher responded. Part 9. Now what? After the apology, Watcher mostly kept a pretty low profile and went on with their business. I mean, what else were they supposed to do? They were actually set to go on tour when all of this went down, which is crazy. I can't imagine what it would have been like to go on stage and be face to face with your fans after this. Watcher's fans remained divided, but in the grand scheme of things, the drama had pretty much blown over after they made their apology. However, there are a few more things I'd like to go through as we catch up to the present day. I mentioned it before, but their Patreon was pretty suddenly and unceremoniously shut down in June of last year. Wait, this adds up to 104. For Your Amusement ended up separating from Watcher because, according to Ryan, it was one of their only series that was actively losing them money. And in December, Shane and Ryan went back to where it all began for a one-off collaboration with BuzzFeed Unsolved. A few months ago, Watcher took down Goodbye YouTube and an update. I feel like that was a bad idea. If the information is no longer accurate, it would be best to edit the title or description, or maybe add a pinned comment. If the videos aren't available, people who want to watch them will instead be directed to re-uploads, or perhaps the vast amount of commentary videos dunking on this decision. And lastly, there have been multiple instances throughout the past year of AI-generated art being used in Watcher videos. As a company that had previously made a point to hire artists and illustrators, Watcher once again looked like hypocrites. This had happened multiple times last year, and a couple months ago, Shane made a comment on Reddit stating that it had been an oversight and the company would be better going forward. Watcher TV is still up and running and seems to have improved over time, and they're still posting regularly on YouTube. They don't seem to have cut down on any of their spending, and their videos have maintained about the same level of quality. So you would think Watcher was pretty much able to recover from the drama, but I don't know if that's entirely true. Just last month, Watcher fired their creative and production team in favor of a shift to freelance employees, including Katie LeBlanc, who posted on LinkedIn about the layoffs. It's with great difficulty that I have to share that my time at Watcher Entertainment has come to an end. On Friday, the company announced that due to financial strain, they would be laying off the entire creative and production team. If you or someone in your network could use an experienced content strategist and creative executive, I'd love to connect. Additionally, I have a list of insanely talented producers, production managers, editors, directors, and branded content experts who were also affected by these layoffs. Any company would be lucky to have them. This is like the internet equivalent of when Pixar fired the woman who basically saved Toy Story 2. Shane confirmed the layoffs on Discord and gave fans an additional update. Over the past year, we've obviously been reassessing our structure and trying to land in a place that makes sense for the sustainability of the company. And recently, we made the decision to rely more heavily on freelance work for series that require more infrequent involvement. Unfortunately, that meant laying some people off from full-time positions and converting them to freelance. But just to allay any concerns, the company is still intact and moving full steam ahead into Ghost Files season with a full slate planned for the next year. Oh my god. Guys, you're still not listening! I don't think a single person saw these layoffs and thought, but what about Ghost Files? Like, why even mention it? Yeah, we just fired a bunch of our employees because we don't have the money to employ them full time, but don't worry, we'll be back soon with another season of our most expensive show. And yes, Watcher did hire far too many employees, but many of them were friends and family. And as a company, they were living above their means in so many other ways. Remember when Ryan said a season of Ghost Files costs hundreds of thousands of dollars? Remember how nobody was really that interested in Travel Season, which brought on additional talent and was presumably pretty expensive? Remember their huge office space in one of the most expensive cities in the world? There were so many things they could have done before they started laying people off. I'm not trying to be a hater, but they haven't really solved the problem. They just built like 5 more miles of track and kept rolling full steam ahead. I keep using all these metaphors. Is that confusing? Part 10. I've connected the dots.
You didn't connect shit, but
I've connected them.
I wanted to end this video with one key takeaway, but it kind of just seems like everything went wrong. Ryan and Shane had nearly unlimited support from their audience, and they somehow snatched defeat from the jaws of victory at every turn. Watcher's business model was completely flawed from the jump. They got too big for their britches, they misjudged their audience, and they made a huge jump that they weren't really ready for. They were also dishonest about their content being removed from YouTube and the severity of their financial situation. I always found it fascinating that the backlash was so intense when so many YouTubers have gotten away with so much worse. From what I can see, there were a few reasons why. Watcher's reputation was practically flawless before Goodbye YouTube. They were pretty much universally thought of as unproblematic, which made their screw-up so much bigger. But there's a common denominator with every YouTuber controversy, no matter how severe the crime. Viewers don't like when their favorite creator contradicts the view they have of them, whatever it may be. People don't like thinking of their favorite creator as bigoted or predatory or a bad person. I'm not saying anyone involved with Watcher is a bad person, but it's all about optics and how your audience perceives you. And Watcher's audience felt taken for granted by the people they cared about. To many of their fans, these guys had revealed themselves to be inauthentic and egotistical. Everyone realized they were bad businessmen, they apologized, and then they continued to be bad businessmen. So I'm going to come at this not as a businesswoman, but as a former fan. This is simply what I would want to see from the company and what I think would convince a lot of former viewers to come back. Watcher, here's what you do. Number 1. Revive your Patreon. Include a Watcher TV subscription with any tier higher than $6 a month. Add a bunch of benefits that would appeal to your viewers without costing you any money. Number 2. Shift your focus towards the series that cost you less and make you more. Fans love Are You Scared, Too Many Spirits, Top 5 Beatdown. Steven can still have his food shows, but maybe there should be less of a focus on expensive food specifically. Number 3. Simplify your more elaborate and expensive shows. You don't need intricate sets or fancy graphics. Like I said, you could go back to plain text on a black background and your fans would be happy. Bringing back Wheeze would genuinely be insanely effective. In fact, your former fans would be happy too, because I think a lot of them just want to see that you're cutting down on unnecessary costs. Number 4. Create a rotating cast of 15 plus characters. This is kind of what Try Guys have been doing. Shows like Top 5 Beatdown and Puppet History have the added benefit of a guest. If you bring on guests with fan bases of their own, which you've done before, it'll be easy to draw people in. You could implement any one of these changes, and I'd assume you'd be much better off. I don't want it to seem like I'm telling anyone what to do, even though that's exactly what I just did, because I don't know what I'm talking about. I just want Watcher to be able to recover from this, and I don't want anyone to walk away from this video hating Watcher, or anyone involved with it. At the end of the day, I don't think they're evil. I think they bit off more than they could chew, had no idea how to run a business, and yeah, maybe they got a little bit greedy, but I think those are all very easy mistakes for a content creator to make. For a while now, I've been kicking around the idea of making a Patreon of my own. I'd been wanting to for months, but I was working on this video simultaneously, so I felt like I had to avoid Watcher's mistakes, otherwise I'd look like a hypocrite with cheese and extra pickles. So out of curiosity, I did what Watcher didn't, and I asked my audience. I made a community post and I was like, hey, if I were to make a Patreon, would you join? And the answer was a resounding no. Everyone was very kind and expressed a similar sentiment as many of Watcher's fans. They'd like to support, they just didn't have the money, which is totally understandable. I wouldn't be thinking about making a Patreon if I didn't also need money. Obviously, it's too late now, but before adding a revenue source like a Patreon or, say, your very own exclusive streaming service, asking your audience if they'd like to financially support you, or even if they're able to, helps you get a sense of where they're at and how they feel. If most of them say no, that doesn't mean you can't do it, that just helps you shape your approach, and I think if Watcher had done that, they wouldn't have been so blindsided by the negative response. They probably wouldn't have ever gotten to the point where people got angry with them. So much like Watcher, only smaller and less funny, I decided to go through with it. So I have a Patreon now. I also have a YouTube membership with the same pricing. Both are completely optional, and my content here on YouTube isn't going anywhere. And if you're unable to donate for whatever reason, please don't! It's absolutely fine. I'm insanely lucky to have the support that I do. Like, if I get 0 patrons, well, I'll be a little embarrassed, but I'll be fine. I'm very interested to see what happens with Watcher now. I want them to succeed, a lot of people do. I really thought they had been, but the recent layoffs would indicate otherwise. I do hope they're able to make the changes necessary to thrive. I hope Shane, Ryan, and Steven get to continue doing what they love. And I especially hope their former employees are able to find meaningful work elsewhere. At this point, it's impossible to predict what will come next. So what does the future hold for Watcher? I have no idea. I guess we'll just have to find out. But until then, the answer remains unsolved. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you liked me, be sure to subscribe to my channel. If you want, you can even turn notifications on so you'll be the first to know the next time I'm hunting for ghosts in a big old hospital. You can also check out my brand new Patreon linked in description, or hit the join button here on YouTube for a ton of extra perks. It would be very much appreciated. Anyways, that's going to be all from me. I've got to go perform an elaborate one-woman puppet show about the Great Fire of London, and you'll never guess who started it. Goodbye, YouTube! See you later!